So I want to get out of the way. I don't want you to focus on me right now. I want you to focus on what's on the screen right here. There's a lot of great quotes out there about innovation. We all love those motivational posters, right? This young lady was a marine biologist, exploring things down in the deep, deep depths of the ocean and finding new ways in how to bring that science into our day-to-day life. She was very clear that we need to evolve our thinking, we need to evolve our approach, and it's through those innovations that we drive and spur economic growth. Some of the folks you haven't heard of, maybe you have, Julia Gillard, former Prime Minister of Australia. She knew that we had to focus on our people, educating our people. Education is critical to ensuring that we have the talent that we need to drive the innovation into the market. Some people you probably have heard of. I don't think this guy needs any introduction, but we do need those people to step up. And those people can be anywhere in your organization. You don't necessarily have to look to the CEO. You could look to that new hire, that person that's at the front desk. It's amazing what they see. They see everything that goes on in your organization. They talk to everybody that comes through the organization. At the end of the day, what we do now, what you know to be true, was only once just an idea. My name is Ed Hallda. I've been here since the late 80s. The Navy dropped me off here. And I was that kid, somewhat annoying if you ask some people, that was always asking, well, why? And how? And I still do that to this day, although I'm not much of a kid anymore. Today we're going to be talking with some leaders in your community, people that have ventured out. Maybe they still have a day job, but they're also working on that side hustle. And we're going to talk about some of the stories and some of the issues that they've gone through. Whether it was finding money or capital, trying to operationalize, there's always some obstacles along the way. And we always have those obstacles. You'll find those obstacles, right? Because at the end of the day, we all want to get to where we want to go, but no one wants to die when they get there, right? Okay, so let's start and introduce some of the panel. My first panelist is a drummer in a punk rock band right here in Bremerton, the former Chief Information Security Officer for the City of Seattle, and the founder of CI Security, Mike Hamilton.
Can I sit down?
Yeah, have a seat. Hopefully we'll have some microphones here
Sorry,
shortly.
I missed the last tech meeting. I was at a conference.
You're fine. You're welcome here.
Okay.
There's some water for you. We might need it. Our next panelist, she started her career in a very innovative form of work as a face painter at the age of 14. She also, you can find her behind the microphone at karaoke sometimes. She's the co-owner of Spark Commons, a co-working space here in Bremerton, as well as a marketing firm, Super Deluxe Marketing, Maureen Jan.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You've also heard of the Sons of Anarchy, I'm sure. What you probably haven't heard of is the Harley riding group out of Paulsbo called the Sons of Technology. Our next panelist wants to change the way in how we invest in our country's infrastructure. He is the CEO of Velocis and the co-founder for Alpha Ledger Technologies, Chris Wade. Our next panelist, if you don't find her out on a boating excursion, she's building a world-class sales team for high-tech companies on a global scale, former IBM and Microsoft executive, Chase Morgan. And finally, she was a 40 under 40 marketing executive and now the founder of Ladybox, focused on feminine care and hygiene. Algernon Sperber. Okay, are we ready? Fantastic. Does everybody have a mic? We're going to be passing this thing around? Okay.
Turns out I am a mic.
So, yeah. So the focus is on you. I'm not going to move around too much and distract you, so I'll come over here and join you guys on stage. Before we get started, I kind of want to add a little bit of color here, and I wonder if you guys could help me out. I'd like to start with you, Mike. What was the inspiration to start your company, CI Security?
Okay, great question. So I used to be the managing consultant for VeriSign's Global Security Consulting, which means I led teams to break into networks and did really cool things. Like, there is no better conversation you can have in a hotel bar when somebody asks, what do you do? Well, I break into networks for money, usually banks. But so that means I lived in hotels, went to work on airplanes, drove rental cars, and ate in restaurants all the time. And when I turned 44, my daughter was born. And if you were going to be dad, you cannot go to work on an airplane anymore. So I took a giant haircut and took the job as the Chief of Information Security for the city of Seattle. And when I got there and started to look around at the criticality of the things that your local government does for you, making your water drinkable, making your toilet flush, making the cops get to your house on time, making sure your house doesn't burn down, managing traffic, and nobody was watching that stuff, that's really why I started the company, because there is a huge unmet need out there, and it's so critical that somebody's got to get after it, and that was really the motivation.
Maureen, what was the inspiration for you to start a co-working space in the middle of developing a marketing firm?
So about 2.5 years ago, I was on a ferry over on my way to Seattle, and I got a letter that said, "You're fired." And I was like, oh, crap. Right? And so I came home, turned around on the boat after a few beverages, and went to my husband and took him by the shoulders, and I said, I'm not going to work for somebody else. Are you okay with that? And he was like, okay, let's do this. And so that's how my marketing agency was born. And then about 1.5 years into that, I was offered an opportunity to partner with a few fantastic people to take over a co-working space that could possibly go defunct in downtown Bremerton called Spark Commons. And I was so delighted to have that opportunity. And so we said yes, and we took it over. And we've done some pretty great things. We've taken it from in debt to profitable and had some really fun times, made some great friends.
Awesome. Now, Chris, you have a successful software development firm, Velocis, in Paulsbo. Yet you chose to found Alpha Ledger Technologies. What was the inspiration behind that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that was such a good idea yet. Velocis has been taking off and very solid for a good number of years, and we were looking for ways to give back to the community, and attending the tech committee meetings and John Powers with the KEDA meetings really got us involved in the community, and the community was asking for ways to grow and invest in themselves. And at Velocis, we've got a lot of experience with software development and working in the bond markets. We thought, well, why isn't there a way for us to be able to invest in our own community, invest in the bonds that are doing the work? We've seen the growth, we've seen traffic, we've seen all these things happening. We know that our municipalities are the ones that are shouldering the work to get that done. And they've got to get loans, they've got to get bonds to get this work done, and yet there's no way for the people in this room to invest directly. And so, Bob Hunter at the KEDA Tech meeting said, I know people that want to invest. And so we did some research, and we put a good team of people together at Alpha Ledger and came up with a technology platform that allows people to invest in their local communities.
Very cool. Chase, I want to skip over you because I'm going to come back and have you give us that overarching guidance. Aljalyn, what was the inspiration behind creating Ladybox?
Well, I was sitting on my couch during my cycle 3 years ago and was wishing I could have my feminine hygiene products delivered to me and not have to deal with Amazon. I love Amazon, but didn't want to have to deal with it. So I went online to go see if there were any companies doing anything like a subscription box that delivers feminine hygiene products, and there was. And back then I didn't feel empowered enough to do anything about it. But this year, in March, one Saturday when I was child-free, I grab a pen and a notepad, and I just started writing down all of these things that I wanted to do because I wanted to create a company where I could have a culture that is about collaboration and community, and then have a company that is making a positive impact in the world. And I thought, well, I had this idea a couple years ago about feminine hygiene, so why don't I just do it? So I put everything together of like what goes in the box, and it's all got to be organic and it's got to be sustainable, and just took it from there and have been working with different vendors and companies and curating the box and putting it together.
Fantastic. Jason, I want to come back to you because as a senior partner with Bridge Partners, you see companies like this all the time and you help them be successful. What can Bridge Partners do, or what advice would you give to help our panelists be successful?
That is a loaded question. How much time do we have here? We heard some really fabulous stories just here, but also earlier today about what does success take. And I love the topic of bruises to brawn, because what I've done in my career has been a really odd track. I mean, I would take a job like at a big company and keep taking the next job rather than having a plan. But it turned out that it gave me a lot of insight into different phases of development and also different industries. I guess on the advice side, it's like, where's the pain? Where is the pain right now? And everybody's at a different place. So if you can identify and be self-aware enough about your business to not be too delusional, there's usually a way to alter. And sometimes I love what is happening in like the gig economy too. It's like you just stop and you do something else. But everything that we've all done has led us to here. My deal was I was started at IBM when I was 21 selling mainframes. I didn't know I was the first girl doing that in my office, and just kind of like we've heard, you just do the next thing. Right. And I'll just say that I joined Bridge Partners 10 years ago after I left Microsoft, and they needed somebody who knew how to help them scale through sales. And that was what I knew. So it was, and I happened to be female, and they didn't have any of those. So this is a really amazing opportunity to continue to learn how to develop our own stories.
We're going to be talking about scaling sales throughout this panel discussion, because that's one of the most critical things in growing your company. I think Chris and Mike, having built technology platforms, you'll find that building the tech is not really the hard part. Making sure that the tech is valid, that's kind of critical, and the way to validate that is usually through sales. So we'll get back to that. But for the sake of this panel, I want to put some context for the conversation. So we're going to define innovation just for the sake of this conversation, okay? The first thing I want to note is that I guess I should point this direction. An idea may be creative. Doesn't mean it is, but it may be creative. All ideas are not innovation, right? An idea is just an idea. Innovation is the execution. It's the realization of the idea. And that's really where the hard stuff happens. We're finding people at a variety of stages of development. Al-Jalin, I believe your website is getting launched this week?
Before Thanksgiving. I just need to, I need a few more things taken care of, and then it'll be ready to go. JoinLadybox.com.
And Chris, you're in beta right now. You're just out of alpha and going into beta.
Right.
And Mike, you're a little longer in the tooth, correct? You've been having 2 years of out in the marketplace selling this, and you are nationally.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah, we have stuff in Luxembourg, Paris, Dusseldorf, all over.
So we're going to talk about innovation sitting on the stool, and we're going to give it 3 legs, okay? We're going to focus on the team. We're going to focus on the validation. Some folks might call that traction. And then we're going to talk about the money. Without these 3 things, you're probably going to have a hard time getting that idea, that innovation out to market, okay? So let's get started. Mike.
Yes.
Cybersecurity. very intense, highly technical focus area. How have you built your team?
It started out with taking the ferry to Seattle every day and grabbing people that were at my table and convincing them that this was something that they should help me do. That's where it started. And eventually, because I have been in the weirdo cyber business for 30 years, I have a pretty big network of people I know. And there were some people that bought into the mission, right? I mean, it's not so much about the technology. We don't do something that's that unique. We do something that's very innovative along with it. But it was really about the mission, right? It's about protecting the things that really will affect you at the scale of your actual life, right? Letter from a credit card company, boom, into the trash. 911 doesn't work because your kid's not breathing. Worst day you're ever going to have, right? So that mission was able to attract a lot of people that I had known and that I trusted, and somehow I got them to work for free, because that really has a lot to do with it.
Now, how do you fill your pipeline with talent? It's a tough.
Well, that's the innovation piece, right? So there's innovation and there's disruption, right? Sucking all the air out of the room. And so what we do is security monitoring. We kick the bad guys out of computer networks, right? We don't keep them out, we kick them out. We're the bouncers. And because we're so focused on this critical services that affect you at the scale of your life, what we have done is this. We monitor down market local governments for free because A, they can't afford it, B, they make your toilet flush. But rather than us doing the analysis of the data that we collect off those networks, it goes over to the Washington State Academic Cyber Range in Poulsbo that's operated by OC and Western Washington, and they built curriculum around it. So students that are getting a university education and getting their book learning and test taken are also sitting their butts in front of live fire and figuring out issues in the critical infrastructure in their neighborhoods. And when they come out of there, we hire them. And that's how we have cracked the code on the people problem at scale.
This is not the first time I've heard this story in Kitsap, working closely with Olympic College and their partners, Western Washington University, being able to drive curriculum to create the talent that you need and then recruit them into your organization. Internships, a very powerful tool, and they're at our disposal.
We just signed up Central Washington, Spokane Falls, and Green River as a so if you know like 20 cities that need security for free.
Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit because Al-Jalin, I understand you're searching for a co-founder. And I'm curious, what are you looking for and why?
I am seeking a user interface and user experience professional because it's important for a subscription box-based company to have a positive and easy user interface and to set up a back end so that we can easily segment the customers based off of not just their flow and their preference on the feminine hygiene products, but there's a lot of allergy issues and dietary restrictions, so I want to be sensitive to that. And then also, Ladybox is inclusive, so it's not just for women who bleed, but it's also for men who bleed too, so I want to be sensitive to those things. So being able to have somebody to work with that understands a positive user interface and user experience, that's going to be important for a subscription-based company.
So the co-founder discussion is huge. We talk about it a lot through 6 Month Startup. Dave Parker has a lot of material around that and how you go about selecting and choosing. Does anybody have a co-founder horror story, like somebody like, why did I do this? Take your pick, yeah.
Yeah, I think I've had businesses my whole life. It's been part of like my DNA as a human being. And even when I was working a full-time job, I always had a side hustle. And I have been trying to partner for like 8 businesses. I've never successfully done it. So if you have a secret, I don't know, please do let me know, because all of them have usually gone down in flames. They've been horrible, tears, screaming, things thrown out the window, table flipping, awful.
I got one too. So when I joined this little bitty firm that had 12 people, I was the third partner, and I recruited another partner, somebody I'd worked with in big business before. What I didn't know is that we weren't on the same page culturally. And so we did have a partner that was able to build business, be a real personality, but wasn't firm first. So that idea about, are you there for the same reason, was the critical miss that we had. And, it cost us some momentum and rep.
Hiring and bringing on a co-founder is a lot different than just having an employee, right? Now you have someone else that they've got a stake in the game and they want to be heard.
We're still under legal review, so I can't talk about it.
There you have it, and I think there's an answer in that. Chris, your team has a lot of software developers. You're building a software platform, but also understand that Alpha Ledger has a regulated arm. That's part of your team. Why was that created?
Right. So Alpha Ledger is a SaaS provider of marketplace technology, and in order to meet the guidelines of organizations like FINRA and SEC, we created a wholly owned subsidiary called Iris Trading, which is a licensed broker-dealer. So it's kind of a separate arm to handle the financial institutions.
Gotcha. Does anybody have any lessons learned from early hires, things that maybe you could help our audience, and what to look for, what to avoid?
The number of stories I have that are horrible are endless. I have three of the four original founders are still with the company, and the one that had to go was the original CTO, and it was amicable, and he finally went. But just a brief horror story. We were going to do a team building thing one time, and one of the founders had a house in Stehekin, and so we were going to take a Cessna over to Stehekin. And if you've ever landed in Stehekin, it's a pasture. That wasn't even the worst part of it. The worst part of it was when we flew up the Columbia River and we were having a great time, and we had to stop in Wenatchee and fuel up, and for whatever reason the fuel gauges didn't work. And we were 200 feet in the air and engine stopped, and we were dropping like a stone. And if it hadn't been a bush pilot that could land anything anywhere, we were dead. And plane crashed, big hole in the back of the plane, took picture of the hole, everything like that. And bush pilot guy, we pushed the thing off the runway and take it up to the gas station. He gasses it up and gets all this oil off the windshield and says, "Let's go." And like idiots, we got back in. And then he's trying to, make us calm as we're trying to land in Stehekin, and the plane is going like this, and it's a box canyon, and he's trying to show us the geology over there on the side. We just know we're going to die. And yeah, we got back in.
Meanwhile, there's a hole in the plane.
And there's a hole in the plane. And eventually the FAA called and had an investigation. Guy fled to Africa, and I won't tell you what happened to him, but he had a bad outcome. Yeah, it's true.
Okay, so on the note of creating teams, I think curiosity is one of the biggest core founding principles that I use when I hire or I partner with people. So when you find really curious people who are interested in other people and their problems and the challenges and the way that they go about trying to solve those problems and challenges, you end up with really fantastic team members.
Fantastic. Chase, what challenges do you think the folks on the stage tonight are going to face as they build and scale their sales teams?
First, can I do a little icebreaker with the group? Okay, this is a safe space. We're all friends here. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd like you to answer honestly. How many of you have been on a sales quota and been responsible for closing business with customers? Raise your hand. This is awesome. Okay. So I'm not going to ask you to say whether you loved it or not, but when you're hiring salespeople or looking at a sales strategy, I would call that the route to market. You really have to know what your value prop is. You have to be able to say it really quickly in an elevator or in a bar, and You also, when you're looking at sales structure, you really have to know what a salesperson can do for you and why you would hire them. And that was one of the things that was a basic deal that my partners didn't know, what a salesperson should have as profile. They were smart consultants and they had built businesses, but they'd never really been bag-carrying reps. And so those of you, I would say a large majority in the room, you know there's a DNA factor to that. And you have to be able to put your story forward, be able to find your prospects, be diligent, have a way to follow up. You don't need a lot of technology if you've got the drive and the organization. Where are you in your company's history? Are you looking for just a couple of references? You're getting your lighthouse sales? Or if you're a B2C, do you need to find your influencers and figure that way out? So it really depends on what kind of company you are, but you need somebody that understands how to sell what you do or what you want to do. That's just my first question I would ask anybody.
So I've spent a good portion of my career implementing sales technology, so to help salespeople be effective. And I was always surprised at such a high turnover rate in the sales group. Why is that? Back to the quota question?
Back to the voter question. How many of you stuck around? Yeah. So first of all, I also was a regional manager for Siebel Systems, so I understand sales technology. Salespeople hate sales technology.
So they just left the conversation with me.
That's one thing. We should have a chat about that. Churn is a part of a sales organization. And for high-end complex sales, 5 years is about the longest you're going to have somebody even on a gravy train account. Then they burn out or they plateau and they forget to be innovative and curious. Plus, all their clients changed seats. So I know B to B better than I know B to C. But a lot of times people just get better jobs. You know, if they're in a tough, high quota ratio, you know, where most of their job is commission paid, that's a hard way to live. And so I think people burn out of that and they become managers. You know, you lose your best sales rep because you promote them. But it's a longer answer, I think, than you might be looking for on this. But the route to market is a piece of the business plan that has to be thought through very, very carefully, because that includes what kind of channel play are you looking for.
Let's switch over to another leg and let's talk about validation and traction. Mike, I want to ask you aside from a plane crash, what are some of the obstacles you had to launching your company?
Wow. So one of the obstacles was the amount of money I had saved. Right, because you have never experienced the life of an entrepreneur until you have made payroll with a credit card. And, you know, everybody's going, yeah, see? So, you know, there was that. That was an obstacle. Another obstacle was actually getting the technology to where it would be taken up by enough customers to where we could demonstrate to investors that we had a viable product. And it took a couple iterations for us to get there. And, you know, in fact, we had to get to our second CTO who had other design principles, and he did a pretty good job with that. Those really were the biggest barriers. You know, after that, success, you know, to us, the way that we define it is how happy, one of the ways we define it is how happy the people are that are working. And, you know, there's a book that's Neil Doshi, and he talks about play, purpose, and potential, right? Work's got to feel like play, got to be having a good time. Your mission has got to be something everybody gets behind. They've got to feel like they're doing something, they're doing the right thing. And potential, they got to feel like they're going somewhere. There's a route for them. And so we've focused on those things really hard. And so our analysts, who are our product, right? We are solving a people problem for our customers. If cyber people were littering the landscape and they were $30,000 a year apiece, just hire your way out of the problem. That's not the way it is. So if we're a focal point for those people, we inherit that problem. We have to make sure that we have a good retention rate. We have about 95% retention on our analysts, which means we're doing a good job. That really, I think, is the hardest hill we have to climb.
So, Mark, we have two marketing specialists on the panel, both Aljalyn and Maureen. I want to ask both of you, from your perspective, what are the most important steps that early stage companies can do to market themselves and gain traction?
Sure. So with my marketing background and what I wanted to do with Ladybox, I knew that I had to get emails to get any traction and validation on whether or not Ladybox would be a viable product. And so, setting up your social channels, setting up email marketing plan, and then having a targeted list of media that you want to reach out to, and then a targeted list of influencers. All those different channels are going to be really important to go out the gate with. You don't need a big following to start out with, but just having those channels to have some kind of social proof and proof that you're existing, the credibility is important to consumers and to potential clients.
I totally agree. But one of the things that I encourage my clients to start with early on is falling in love with their customer and really understanding who they are, their heart, their minds, their brains, get in their heads, because ultimately when you know who your most profitable customer is and you know who your most influential customer is, and especially if you're a small business, who your most enjoyable customer is, these three types of customers will improve the quality of your work life and possibly your entire life. It will make it easier for you to write about your customers, because everything is about content, right? Your website, your advertising campaigns, everything is about your content. And if you don't know your customers so well that you see one up and you want to rush up and give them kisses on the cheek, you're probably not in it enough to be able to offer the level of insight and business challenge solving that they need to really fall in love with you as a company.
So all of our businesses, yeah, go ahead.
One thing. So there's a huge connection in marketing and sales. I mean, and it's like that when you're a new company. And it can get divided as you grow. So that's my encouragement to everybody today. You have to do everything that you've mentioned, and your sellers, whatever your channel looks like, has to mirror that.
So, tools, right? Like if you're in marketing and you're figuring out who those beautiful, wonderful customers are, first of all, half of the reason you're doing that is because you have salespeople out there talking to them, and you're learning from the salespeople, and you're providing them with tools that really enable them to do an amazing job of going and getting more of those amazing customers, right?
So we're all trying to provide value to our customers, and we also need them to trust that the value that we're providing is genuine, it's real, and it's meaningful. I want to switch over to Chris, because your Alpha Ledger has to provide value to banks, and unless you fill out a couple of forms and you've done some background checks, banks aren't the most trusting unless you're making a deposit, right? So how are you building value to local banks, and how can they trust your platform?
Right. Well, so the platform, first of all, banks and credit unions, financial institutions, represent the local people, right? All of the account holders that they have are probably from our community. And so we're trying to get, those are the folks that we want access to these municipal projects. So if we have a large project coming up, a bridge, a road, something that's, say, over $100 million, maybe something that's possibly too large for a single institution to loan on, we want them to be able to take part of that, right? And then share that opportunity with other banks, other investors, other institutions. But hopefully keep those investments local, so we can keep that money working for our community. And we do that all through a secure network. We use CI security. Yeah. Thank you. And that all happens on a blockchain network, and we use blockchain to get our arms around all of the transactions that happen throughout that entire process of investment.
And so that's the value proposition you're providing to banks. Have there been any obstacles in being able to make those connections with that target group, the banks?
Mainly, it's just a matter of time. Right now, we're working on getting out to see people one at a time, right? So making those appointments, making the introductions, getting people to know who Alpha Ledger is, what it's all about.
I think I've always found it interesting that folks that have the great ideas and that are building these great platforms aren't necessarily the ones that are able to go out there and shake the hand and ask the questions and get their feedback and ask them if they can come back and, hey, do you mind if I come back in 2 weeks and show you what we've done based on this feedback, and keep that conversation and that relationship going. I think that's a critical value to all of us in making sure that we can gain and build traction. I'm going to be doing a poll here in a second, so if you haven't already used your phone, there's little cards on your table that show you the website. That's how you can ask questions. And then Teresa's going to launch a poll shortly, and I'd love to get as much feedback from the audience when I do that. That's going to happen here shortly.
Just download this app to your phone, yeah.
Yeah, it's a website. It's not an app. So we've heard a lot about co-working, and co-working is there's value in being able to have access to space, being able to have access to the density in the community to be able to work your idea. I'm curious, Maureen, as someone who owns a co-working space, what does co-working have to offer people and businesses in Kitsap?
Well, first of all, I know you guys have heard about Vibe, so we're going to wave at Alana. Hey! I think one of the biggest things is you really need to have flexible local workspaces, right? I mean, when we're talking about what Dave was talking about, when you have... We have a local co-working space in every community here in the peninsula, almost every community, every major community. So you can have a space in Silverdale. You can find Office Expats. They've been around for 10 years out in Bainbridge Island. You also have, us, Spark Commons here in Bremerton, and there's like 3 or 4 other ones. It's incredible. You don't even know we exist. But if you're looking for a place that can offer you that kind of flexibility, it's affordable. You can think about if you want a space to collaborate and have community and be part of a larger group of entrepreneurs, you can do that for as little as $100, at least in my space, as well as get yourself a mailing address so people, you can put your LLC not to your home address so people don't show up at your house knocking going, where's my product? Gets awkward. But they could come to our co-working space and we promise to keep them away from you. The other thing you want to look for in your communities, in a co-working space, you can look for the community aspect, the moral support. Like a perfect example is today. We were all having a terrible day this morning, and there were hugs and chocolate passed around in my space, high fives, some very awesome choice of music, because we were all commiserating and creating a moral network, like a moral support network that was really critical. And if you've been the entrepreneur that works in your basement, any hands? Who works out of their home? At least part of the time. Enough of us, right? So after a while, you get real weird in your basement when you're by yourself. I know. I hung out with my dog for a year, and then I was like, oh, I gotta go. So it's really nice to have lunch with people, even though you might be on your own. The other part is resources are a critical part of co-working. For instance, we do a monthly workshop that's geared for small businesses. And it's really to help you be a bit better business owner. And for instance, we had one on investing last month, and then we have another one coming up about Facebook advertising. So excited, and I know all of the co-working spaces offer these kind of professional development opportunities, and you should seek them out. Even if you're not a member of the space, you can still go be part of that. And then access to knowledge. People who sit across from you may not work in the same organization that you do, but they provide a different role, a different perspective. It's shocking how many times I've been able to shout across the room and say, hey, Joe, what do you think about this? And Joe yells back, oh, this is my perspective. And what it does is create it curates this opportunity for innovation. So that's
As a founder and entrepreneur, going at it alone is a surefire way to get depressed really fast. So having access to these resources, the energy in a space, is invaluable to that. So I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to shave some of the program because of our time. But here we're seeing that 11 out of 12 startups fail, 19 out of 20 product innovations fail. I'd like you all to go to your poll. And there's a series of reasons why we think these things fail. And I'm curious what you guys think. I'm curious, why do you think startups fail? There's a series of answers. I think you can pick 3. Is that it? 3 out of that list? Okay. And while that happens, we'll continue with the program. But please give us your thoughts. Who is Mike? You've probably raised the most money here because you've been at it longer. Yeah. What advice do you have for people that are seeking money?
Yeah, get it, exactly. So advice for raising money. So first of all, it's not good enough to have an idea or a product. You need customers. You have got to demonstrate that you can actually make money. And secondarily, I would, today, I wish I would have known then what I know now, and that's the difference between the expectations of seed investors, Series A investors, Series B investors, because all along that way, those investors have different expectations. And if you're sensitive to that and you align with those expectations, you're going to have much better conversations. I'll leave it at that because this is deep. There's a lot there. I would also say, don't use investment bankers. There's another story I won't tell. Don't use investment bankers.
Just, my 2 cents. I've found that the best opportunity for finding funding is marrying rich. True story. I know that's not going to be popular. Or go with an excellent bank, right? Yeah. Or a credit union.
Chris, what challenges have you faced in raising money for Alpha Ledger?
So honestly, I spend most of my time focused on the technology, and we've got 2 partners that focus on raising money. What we did is came up with a kind of a seed round funding vehicle called a SAFE, a simple agreement for future equity, because it was difficult to figure out how to value the company. It's so young, so new, not a lot of customers, not a lot of work going through. We know it's going to be valuable when it gets some traction. So legal fees are another thing to raise money for, but that helps sometimes too in structuring a company. And we've got we'll spend 2 to 3 man hours a day doing nothing but making those phone calls looking for funding.
So I'm just curious, just quick show of hands, aside from what you're doing now, who's worked on something prior to this that maybe they're no longer working on, a different startup, a different business? And who's run out of money? What did you do? What did you do?
Well, I hadn't quit my day job yet.
Okay. So what did you do, Chris?
Well, we had to shut it down. You just shut it down.
Maureen?
I've had a combination of not quitting my day job because I did a lot of side hustles and shutting it down. It's a real bummer.
Fled to Arkansas to avoid the organized crime guys I had been working with, and hunkered down as a consultant for Fortune 1.
Show off.
Okay, we've got some answers to why we think people why they fail. No business model. What's the next one?
No market need.
Is there an eye doctor in the house? Because I need an appointment. Okay, so let's look at why we think startups fail.
Yeah.
So, and I know that's probably hard to read. I apologize for that. But there was, CB Insights did a postmortem analysis of about 101 failed startups. And the number one reason was no market need. It was It was a problem looking for, or a solution looking for a problem, right? Number two was they just ran out of money. So they just didn't have enough money. They didn't plan well for the money that they had, whatever the case may be, and not the right team. Those first three were the three pillars that we started talking about today. There are a host of other reasons why startups fail. I think this is super important for you to understand. These slides will be available to everyone. I think what's really important is understanding that a lot of the companies that Accenture has talked to when they built their strategic innovation survey have said, yes, we have an innovation group, and it's just another department, and we run it the same way that we run the rest of our company. There's a challenge in doing that, and one of the challenges, because they're running it like a regular department, they kind of miss crucial growth opportunities. These folks aren't wired the same way. Your creatives, your strategists are not wired the same way as perhaps your accounting folks or maybe your sales team, right? They're just not wired that way. And what's really interesting to me is we don't do postmortem analysis. We don't do retrospectives. We don't do lessons learned. How do we get best practices? 60% of these companies struggle to learn from their past mistakes. It seems like it should be relatively elementary, but it's not. And now for some of the other folks in the room, I'm just curious, what devices do you target? There are so many devices out there now. We've got computers, laptops. Here I am, I'm using this. There's anybody with a smartwatch in the room. There's a few. So what devices do you target and why? And is it a generational thing?
Well, I have a lot of opinions, but I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Go right ahead, Maureen.
All right. Well, I mean, when you're dealing, you have to plan for all the screens. Like, there's no question about that, right? And but you have to deliver a different experience based on what screen that is and where they are in the larger buyer funnel, right? So when you go back to like understanding the personas and understanding like who you're aiming for and where they are in their buyer journey towards purchasing your goods or your services, then if you're not careful about crafting that each stage of that, then it doesn't matter what screen you're on, you're going to lose. So I'm sure you know.
Yeah, and it's not just about screens, it's about audio too. There is voice recognition tools out there. So if you think about what is in your home right now, do you have an Alexa? Do you have a Google Home? Do you have a Siri speaker? You have to consider those elements too, as well as even smart appliances in the home. That's maybe a little far out, but that's kind of like what I have even been thinking about for Ladybox. Like, do I ever need to be at a place where I need to consider having someone say, hey, Google, order my Ladybox? So I wouldn't just think about the screens. I would think about listening, like earbuds and everything.
I actually loathe and try to avoid every kind of technology. I'm really bad person to ask this question of. I would rather punch out of all of it.
And you actually you went offline of social media and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
So you're the true cybersecurity professional. The most secure computer is the one that's unplugged.
That's right. Well, I still got a Twitter account because I have to express my opinions about things going on, but the rest of it had to go.
So everyone in the room probably does business with somebody on stage today, at least one or two of you. I would hope and I would guess that before the year's end, more people will be doing business with the people that are on stage today. We need you. We need you to be engaged in the community. There's another polling question, if you wouldn't mind to fill out. You're going to be anonymous. I'm curious, what perspective do you bring to this problem? Ladybox is going to have an issue with distribution and logistics, right? How do I get 1,000 of these distributed nationwide? Maybe
fulfillment companies.
Outsourcing.
We need you to mentor a startup. We need you to get involved with Startup Kitsap. We need you to help a colleague, reach out, take a chance. Maybe you know somebody that has an idea and you want to get them connected to somebody who can coach them through that, who's interested in helping and ensuring. I have 3 kids here. My youngest just started her first year at the University of Washington. My middle child just left. He got his early degree, did the running start, got his degree from Olympic College in digital film, and he just arrived in LA, and he wants to go Hollywood, right? And my oldest son is still here in the area as well, scratching his head, wondering what he can do. I want them to stay here, and I want them to prosper, and I'm sure we all want our future generations to prosper as well. On that next poll, what do you bring to the table? What can you bring to the table? I'm curious what Kitsap has to offer in general. We've put up a new website, innovate2020.org. And it is to connect you to resources that are specifically designed to drive innovation into Kitsap County. I ask you to please go. If you can help, if you can volunteer, please do so. It's critical. I want to leave you with one last quote, and that is from the New Climate Economy Report. There is this intersection between technological innovation and a need to invest in our country's infrastructure. We know that it's going to take 20, 30, 40 more years to bring our country's infrastructure up to the grade that it needs to compete on a global level. And we also need increased resource productivity. The things that are happening in our schools, in our local community, the things that are happening with Startup Kitsap to try to increase and elevate the knowledge base of our folks, of our citizens, is critical. This is the only growth story of the 21st century. I want to thank everybody for your time, our panelists, Kathy, Teresa, for putting this on, for all of you for putting up with us and engaging in the conversation. I hope that you stick around afterwards and engage with everybody here. We're happy to be a part of this conversation. We're happy to be a part of Kitsap, and we're happy to be a part of you. Thank you.